Let's talk about consumer preferences. Now, as you have already seen from the lecture slides or from your textbook, that in studying consumer behavior theory, there are three different steps. The first step is understanding consumer preferences, and that is what we will be looking at in this video. This is the first video on consumer preferences. We will have more videos. Okay, so let's talk about consumer preferences. What do we mean by consumer preferences? How do we theorize these preferences? And then we will see if we can draw pictures of these preferences. So in order to understand consumer preferences, first we need to define what is known as a bundle of goods or a market basket. Let's say there are two different goods which a consumer would like to have. One is hamburgers, good X, which is hamburgers, and good Y, which is milkshake. Now, instead of considering each good individually, what we consider here is a bundle of goods, that is some combination of these two goods. And these combinations are named A, B, and C. So these are the bundles or baskets. Goods basket. So for instance, bundle A or market basket A has 2 hamburgers and 1 milkshake. Bundle B has 3 hamburgers and 2 milkshakes, and so on. Now we are going to theorize how the consumer's preferences look like for these 3 bundles. Okay, and once we know that, we can extend that case for other different bundles. Okay, so let's consider these terms that are used to define consumer preferences. The first assumption of consumer preference theory is that of completeness. That is, consumers' preferences must be complete. Now, what do we mean by complete? It simply means that the consumer should be able to rank these bundles. So for instance, the consumer should be able to say if the consumer prefers. So at P means prefers A to B. So either the consumer prefers bundle A to B, or the consumer prefers bundle B to bundle A, or the consumer is indifferent, that is, he gets the same level of satisfaction from consuming either bundle A or bundle B. I'm just using 2 bundles to define these elements of preference because that is enough. You can always extend it to include 3 bundles. So what we are saying here is that if there are 2 different bundles of goods, then either one bundle is preferred to the other, so A is preferred to B, which means that the consumer receives a greater satisfaction or utility from consuming bundle A compared to bundle B. Or it would be the opposite, that is, B is preferred to A. Or it can also happen that the consumer derives the same level of satisfaction or utility from both bundles, in which case the consumer is indifferent between bundles A and B. So either of these 3 has to be true, which is the assumption of completeness. The second assumption is that of transitivity. So preferences must be transitive. Now, what does that mean? It simply means that if the consumer, so for instance, if A is preferred to B and B is preferred to C, then it must be true that A is preferred to C. So what we are saying here is if the consumer prefers, so let me give you another example. If the consumer prefers hamburgers to hot dogs and the same consumer prefers hot dogs to pizzas, then it must be true that the consumer prefers hamburgers to pizzas. So this is an example of a transitive preference. And we are going to assume that this will always hold, and we will see when we apply this and why this is important. Um, the third assumption that must hold about, must be true about consumer preferences is that more is better, or this is also sometimes termed non-satiation. The consumer is always better off with more quantity of the good. So, which means in our case, bundle A, so if you look at the table that we have here, it means that bundle A would be always preferred to B. I'm sorry, let's get rid of that. So we want more is better. So in our example, we have bundle C will always be preferred to bundle B, and bundle B will always be preferred to bundle A. Okay, so these are the three pillars of consumer preferences. Using these three assumptions, now we are going to go to the next step where we want to illustrate these preferences. So we have a graph here. Now on this graph, okay, we are going to plot two goods on two axes. Okay, so each point on this graph represents a bundle of good. So let's plot good X here, which is hamburgers, and let's plot good Y here, which is milkshakes. Now let's consider this bundle here. Let's say this bundle is B, okay, which means we have 3 hamburgers and 2 milkshakes. All right. So now we are going to find out, so with respect to B, we are going to find out the bundles which are more preferred and less preferred to B. So for instance, bundle C we know is more preferred because it has more hamburgers and also more milkshakes. So bundle C has 4 hamburgers. So let's say this is 4. And it has 3 milkshakes. So let's say this is 3. So this is bundle C. Okay. Similarly, all the bundles that are on this quadrant, and that is why I had these lines drawn beforehand. So this quadrant, to the northeast of B, all these bundles are preferred to B because these bundles will have more of both goods X and Y, and therefore more is better, and therefore they are all preferred to B. Now let's consider bundle A. Bundle A has 2 hamburgers and 1 milkshake. So bundle A is somewhere here. Bundle A has less of each good, and therefore it is less preferred to B. So bundle B is always preferred to bundle A. So we can find out all different combinations in this quadrant to the southwest of B, where these bundles are less preferred to B, or B is always preferred to all these bundles here, and all these bundles here are more preferred to B. Now what about these zones? What about, so we know the preferences for these zones. Okay. So these bundles are more preferred to B, and these bundles are less preferred to B. Okay. Now what about this zone and this zone? So let's try to think about it. So let's pick a bundle here. Okay. So let's say that is D, Okay, let's pick another bundle here, which is E. Now, what do we find about these bundles? So D, for instance, has more Y, more milkshakes compared to B. Okay, but less hamburgers. So D, both D and E have more milkshakes but less hamburger. Okay? So we don't know if that would be preferred, these points would be preferred to B. Similarly, on this side, F and G, so here we have more hamburgers but less milkshakes compared to B. Right? So more of one good but less of the other good. So that is what is happening in these two quadrants. And so we don't know, whether they are more or less preferred, because more or less preferred zones have already been identified, which means these zones, there are points, there are combinations of two goods, or there are bundles of goods in these two zones which are equivalent as B. That is, the consumer is indifferent between these bundles. Okay, so we are going to, plot some of these bundles and draw a line. So draw a line. Just bear with me for 1 second. Okay. So we are going to try to draw a curve or a line. So this looks more like a curve which passes through B and these points. So let's call that I0. And we call I0 the indifference curve. We will talk more about the indifference curve in the next video.